I'm Jon Rottier. I am head of growth and consulting with OpenMedium. We do business consulting and web ops implementations for medium to large size businesses. And I was lucky enough to meet Linda Barnes with Natural Habits in seeking out for my clients ways to mitigate costs and really operational costs, especially going through the COVID situation, not just 2020, but also still in 2021. And my clients are looking for really a transparent way to facilitate reducing those costs, and specific to the area of telecom, that's an area where I really needed help. So as I said, I was lucky enough to find Natural Habits and Linda Barnes, and she was willing to basically do this interview where I'm able to ask her the questions again that I asked her initially in my seeking someone out to help my clients. And so before I start asking the questions, Linda, would you mind just giving a quick background of where you come from and why we're talking?
Sure. Well, we founded Natural Habits about 3 years ago as a consulting firm, which was intended to help companies grow their revenue through communications coaching, as well as mitigate costs in an effort to help them improve their bottom line overall. And we've been working together now for about 3 years. I came off of another consulting firm that I founded about 15, 20 years ago called Barnes Consulting Group. And the focus of that organization was purely to do telecommunications consulting.
Excellent.
So we're having a pretty good time.
Yeah, no doubt. And that actually reminds me, one of the things that was eye-opening for me when we first started talking originally, how would you explain your unique value proposition? Because that was different than some of the other firms that I talked to.
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking me that question, because in my travels, I've discovered that you really can't throw a rock without hitting a telecommunication consulting firm. But what I do know is that my background is with telecommunications sales. So I started back a long time ago working for a telecom company, and I understand how the telecommunications companies work, how they create their plans, how they create their billings, how they create their policies and their pricings. And then shortly after I left telecommunications on that side, I went to work for a company where I was buying telecommunications services. So I've actually seen both sides of that equation. And after working on the seller side and the buyer side for a period of time, I thought it might be a good idea for me to move into the center of the table, if you were, and work with companies to help them make sense of both sides of that equation. So what we do now is we function as sort of a translator between the telecommunications companies who are selling the service and the companies who are buying those services, and help them achieve a mutually beneficial relationship.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, because that was definitely a point that stuck with me as far as having the experience on both sides to really understand what's going on and not getting hoodwinked, just understanding one side of it.
Right.
For sure. So I think with that, I'm just going to go through the same questions that I asked when we first met, and let you share your experience there, because that's what got me so excited and why we're doing this. So first is, can you tell us a bit about how the telecom world is changing at the moment and what it might mean for businesses?
Yeah, and I think the most significant thing that's changing for businesses right now is that the 100-year-old infrastructure that's been in the ground since telecommunications was invented, the copper wires and all of those facilities that companies have been using now for generations, are going away. The FCC has mandated now that the companies that provide these services are being permitted to shut them down. And for companies that use things like we call them POTS lines, plain old telephone service, which is probably the phone line that your mom had in her home at one point. There are a lot of companies that still use POTS lines and other types of traditional telecommunication services that are run over copper wire facilities. Because those facilities are so expensive for these carriers to maintain, over the last, I want to say 5 to 7 years, they've been gradually increasing the price of these things to a very uncomfortable rate. It's not at all uncommon to find a POTS line costing a customer anywhere from $150 to $200 a month just to have, which is not sustainable. So what we want to do is work with clients to help them understand what that means for their business and help them move away from those traditional copper services to a more sustainable and, quite frankly, less expensive and more efficient technology.
And it's really, everybody has to move that direction.
They do. And one of the other things that we're seeing a lot of as well, as has been happening for years and years, the telecommunications companies tend to go through this expansion and contraction cycle where we'll see 400 companies on the landscape, and then we may see them buying each other up, and then you're down to 4. We're seeing a lot of consolidation in the telecommunications world of late, particularly with the most recent acquisition of Sprint by T-Mobile. And what we've experienced over the years is that anytime one company combines with another, one of the very last things that they do is combine their billing systems into a seamless platform. What that means for customers is that there's incredible pain with regard to billing, making sure billing is correct, getting customer service to work right, and those types of pain points. So that's another big thing that's happening in the telecom world right now.
And a lot of that, we actually didn't talk about this before, but that I would guess causes a lot of additional cost to the customer as well, because they're trying to maintain these legacy systems or disparate systems and administrations.
Right. It does. It does cause a lot of problems. It causes problems for the customers because they don't know the landscape like we do. We know what kinds of things are happening behind the scenes in the telecom companies, particularly as it relates to their core systems. And so we know how to navigate those landscapes while the carriers are figuring out how to get married and get consolidated properly. We can help those customers navigate those uncharted waters and get the best bang for their buck.
Excellent. Thank you. So the next question that I asked you was, in your experience, what other hidden issues might exist in a company's telecom landscape?
Right. One of the biggest issues that we find with companies is that, especially large companies, is that they've got multiple entities inside of their organizations who are responsible for the consumption of telecommunications. So, for example, the IT department and the telecom department, even though they have a lot of other things on their plate, they will go out and select a solution, a vendor, a platform, those types of things, and they'll purchase that contract with a carrier or carriers. And then they hand it off to the folks who are supposed to implement those things. And it's generally an operational person or human resources. In the case of cellular devices, for example, the human resources folks are the ones who deploy the cellular technology to the employees, right? And especially in COVID, with everybody doing more of a work from home environment, we're seeing far more consumption of wireless and mobility services for customers. And that in itself can increase the cost of the telecommunications environment for that company. Then the third piece of this is the accounts payable people, who very rarely are notified when an employee leaves the company, for example. Did they surrender their mobility device, or did the company close down a bricks and mortar facility? And if they did anybody remember to shut off the telecommunications at that location? That type of thing. So what tends to happen is accounts payable people will continue to pay the bill, not knowing that there's been an environmental change inside of that organization that would impact that bill. So they they are not plugged into that dialogue. And we find in our audit process tons and tons of services that should have been disconnected, shut down, still billing because the device is sitting in someone's drawer or that kind of thing. So we can work to mitigate those costs as well.
So, similar to the last question, when we talked about disparate systems administration platforms, billing, all that kind of stuff that would be typically related to an acquisition. It sounds like this is another area of disparate roles, right? That are not really integrated properly. They're not communicating properly, and so there's a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak, from a cost standpoint that could be taken care of. It's just another way of looking at it, of just more disparity that is not connected to keep things streamlined and cost effective.
That's right. That's right. There is a lot of disconnection inside of a lot of large companies, organizations. And what our role is to touch each of those organizations and communicate with all of them and centralize that effort, that work effort, if you will. We'll find out what the IT people are thinking as it relates to new technologies, what vendors' relationships exist, and if those can be improved upon. We'll work with the people who are doing the day-to-day operations to find out what their processes are, and we work with the accounts payable people to find out exactly what are you paying for, and is there some place that we can find a way, as you say, there's a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, and there was something that that we had talked about before that I'm just asking the same questions that we went through at another time, but one of the things that also was powerful to me that you are able to accomplish due to your experience and your understanding of both sides of the situation was that if there are a lot of unused devices that need to be canceled, that you also have the capability to not just identify what those devices are, and so you know what you shouldn't be paying for anymore, but also to be able to navigate turning those off without having to pay the cancellation fees that typically accompany that kind of an action.
That's right. That's right. And doing that really does require a good working knowledge of how those things work inside of the telecommunications company. So what a lot of companies might do is identify, they may say, oh, look at this list of wireless devices that haven't been used in 6 months, let's shut them off. And then they get a bill for an enormous early termination fee from that carrier. There are ways, and we know how to do these things quite well actually, where we can move those telephone numbers around and move them to repurposed devices, or move them to if a device has been broken, for example, we can change the plan on that particular device so that when we cancel that service, we're not incurring a fee for the customer. It's a little bit like a shell game, but we do it really well, and we've had a lot of practice at it.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that was a key factor for me in some of our initial discussions, because one of the important things in the relationship that we've been able to have recently in getting involved, one of my initial questions was, well, why can't my clients just go figure out what devices they're not using, and they just go turn them off, right? And that was one of the keys. We're like, you'll be careful of this, because most people aren't going to go read the contracts. Most people aren't going to go read the contracts before they go and cancel those policies. So
that's right.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So if organizations are interested in initiating contact with you and getting things started, what does that look like?
Well, there's a number of ways to get in touch with us, but what I would suggest is that if organizations are interested in learning a little bit more, we've put a tab on our website on the homepage called the Telecom Challenge, where we've gone into detail about the different types of problems companies can face, our process for mitigating those issues and ways to contact us.
Excellent. Good deal. Thank you so much. Linda Barnes with Natural Habits, thank you so much for taking the time to help me not have to explain all the details with the telecom landscape to my customers, as I would never be able to explain things the way you are. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. And for anybody who's watching this video, not connected to me or who hasn't already been in touch with Natural Habits, I certainly hope that you have learned a lot and gotten as much out of this as I certainly have, getting to know Natural Habits and Linda Barnes. And we will put contact information up for you in case you want to reach out to them. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you.